For thousands of years, the history of warfare was defined by the strength of the arm and the courage of the heart. From the phalanxes of Greece to the cavalry charges of the Napoleonic era, battle was a distinct, visible, and intimately human collision. It was frantic, chaotic, and bloody, but it was limited by the physical endurance of men and horses. A soldier could only swing a sword for so long. An archer could only loose so many arrows before fatigue set in. The pace of death was dictated by the limitations of the human body. But in the late 19th century, a single invention severed this link forever. It was a machine that did not tire, did not hesitate, and did not feel fear. It turned the battlefield from a place of martial glory into a zone of industrial slaughter. It forced armies into the mud, ended the age of the cavalry, and redrew the maps of empires. It was the first true weapon of mass destruction, not because it destroyed cities, but because it erased entire generations. This is the story of the automatic machine gun, specifically the Maxim gun, the weapon that didn't just change warfare, it broke it. To understand the magnitude of the shift, we must first look at the world that existed before it. In the mid-1800s, military tactics had not evolved significantly for a century. Commanders still believed in the offensive spirit. They believed that a mass of disciplined men charging with bayonets fixed and morale high could overwhelm any defensive position. War was viewed through a romantic lens, a test of national character and individual bravery. Uniforms were bright reds, blues, and golds, designed to be seen through the smoke of black powder. The idea of hiding from the enemy was considered cowardly. Enter Hiram Stevens Maxim. He was not a general or a warrior. He was an American-born inventor, a man of the Gilded Age who had more in common with Thomas Edison than Napoleon Bonaparte. In fact, Maxim was a brilliant electrical engineer who had lost a patent dispute to Edison and moved to London to start anew. The legend goes that in 1882, while in Vienna, an American acquaintance gave him a piece of advice that would alter human history. He told Maxim, "Hang your chemistry and electricity. If you want to make a pile of money, invent something that will enable these Europeans to cut each other's throats with greater facility." Maxim took the advice to heart, but he approached the problem not as a soldier, but as an engineer. He recalled firing a rifle and feeling the heavy kick of the recoil against his shoulder. To a soldier, recoil was a nuisance, the force that bruised the shoulder and threw off aim. To Maxim, it was wasted energy. He realized that if he could harness that backward energy, he could use it to eject the spent cartridge, load a new one, and fire again. The result, unveiled in 1884, was the Maxim gun. It was a marvel of mechanical engineering. It was belt-fed, water-cooled, and capable of firing 600 rounds per minute. That is 10 bullets every second. Previous rapid-fire weapons, like the Gatling gun, were hand-cranked. They were heavy, prone to jamming, and relied on the operator's speed. The Maxim was different. Once the trigger was pressed, the gun fired automatically until the trigger was released or the ammunition ran out. It was the first true automatic weapon. When Maxim demonstrated his invention to the British military elite, they were astounded, but also skeptical. They watched as the gun cut down a tree in seconds. It was impressive, certainly, but the generals struggled to understand where it fit into their gentlemanly conception of war. It consumed ammunition at a rate that horrified the frugal logistics officers. They saw it as a specialized tool for flank defense, or perhaps a replacement for artillery grape shot. They did not see it for what it was, the end of the world as they knew it. The first true tests of this new power did not happen in Europe, but in the colonies. The European powers were in the midst of the scramble for Africa, and the Maxim gun became the ultimate tool of empire. It provided a terrifying force multiplier. Small detachments of European troops could now defeat armies vastly superior in numbers. The most infamous display of this disparity occurred at the Battle of Omdurman in 1998 in present-day Sudan. A British-led force faced an army of over 50,000 Mahdist warriors. The Mahdists were brave, disciplined, and committed. In any previous century, they might have overrun the British lines through sheer weight of numbers. But the British had the Maxim. The battle wasn't a fight, it was an execution. The modest charges melted away before they could get within striking distance. Eyewitnesses described the scene not as a battle, but as a mechanical sweeping. Winston Churchill, who was present as a young cavalry officer, noted the grim efficiency of the slaughter. The romantic charge was dead, killed by a water-cooled barrel and a canvas belt of ammunition. Europe watched, but it did not learn. The generals rationalized Omdurman as a colonial anomaly. They believed that disciplined European troops, with their artillery and modern rifles, would not fall victim to the machine gun in the same way the Mahdists did. They were wrong. Tragic arrogance blinded the great powers as they marched toward 1914. When the First World War erupted, the collision between 19th century tactics and 20th century technology was immediate and catastrophic. In August 1914, the French army marched to war in red trousers and blue coats, led by officers who believed that élan, the will to win, was the deciding factor in battle. They launched bayonet charges across open fields against German positions fortified with Maxim guns, manufactured in Germany as the MG-08. The result was a massacre that is difficult to comprehend even today. In the Battle of the Frontiers, hundreds of thousands of French soldiers were cut down in days. Men would rise up, shout their battle cries, and be silenced instantly by the rhythmic hammering of the machine gun. It didn't matter how brave they were, it didn't matter how well they drilled. The machine gun did not care. A single crew of 2 or 3 men could hold off a battalion. The offensive spirit was shattered by the defensive reality. This technological imbalance is what created the stalemate of the Western Front. Because soldiers could not move across open ground without dying, they dug into the earth. The trenches were not a strategic choice. They were a survival reflex. The machine gun froze the front lines, creating a zone of death known as no man's land. For 4 years, the armies of Europe smashed themselves against this wall of fire. The Battle of the Somme in 1916 stands as the grim apex of this industrial warfare. The British launched a massive offensive, preceded by a week-long artillery bombardment meant to destroy the German defenses. They believed the wire would be cut and the machine gun nests obliterated. But the German dugouts were deep and the machine guns were well protected. When the shelling stopped and the British whistles blew, 100,000 men climbed out of their trenches and walked, they were ordered to walk, toward the German lines. The German gunners emerged from their bunkers, set up their MG-08s, and opened fire. On that single day, July 1st, 1916, the British Army suffered nearly 60,000 casualties. Nearly 20,000 were dead. Most fell without ever seeing the enemy. They were killed by mathematical, intersecting fields of fire, plotted on maps by officers who understood that the machine gun was most effective when firing across the front, creating an impenetrable lattice of lead. The psychological impact of this weapon was as profound as its physical devastation. In previous wars, a soldier could see his adversary. There was a narrative to the combat. Now, death came from an unseen source, a mechanical rattling in the distance. The machine gun depersonalized killing. The gunner did not aim at a specific individual, he swept a zone. The victim did not fight a duel, he simply walked into a stream of bullets. This was the birth of the empty battlefield, where the land appeared devoid of humans because to be visible was to be dead. This stalemate forced a rapid evolution in every other aspect of warfare. If men could not cross the ground, they needed armor. This necessity birthed the tank, a direct response to the machine gun. The tank was designed specifically to crush barbed wire and deflect machine gun fire, acting as a mobile shield for the infantry. If men could not cross the ground, they had to go over it. This accelerated the development of the airplane, transforming it from a reconnaissance tool into a weapon of war. The steel helmet, the flamethrower, and the widespread use of chemical gas were all frantic attempts to break the deadlock imposed by the Maxim gun. Furthermore, the machine gun changed the very structure of armies. Before 1914, the rifleman was the primary unit of firepower. By 1918, the infantry squad was reorganized around the light machine gun. The rifleman became the support, protecting the automatic weapon that provided the killing power. This tactical shift remains the standard in military doctrine to this day. The squad automatic weapon is the anchor of modern infantry maneuvers. The legacy of Hiram Maxim's invention extends far beyond the trenches of World War I. It democratized firepower in a terrifying way. As the technology became cheaper and lighter, it proliferated. The heavy, water-cooled guns of 1914 gave way to the air-cooled light machine guns of World War II, and eventually to the assault rifles of the modern era. The AK-47, perhaps the most recognizable weapon on the planet, is a direct descendant of the principles Maxim established, using gas and recoil to cycle the action. The machine gun also altered the geopolitical landscape. It was the tool that finalized the conquest of the colonial world, and ironically, it became the tool that liberated it. As automatic weapons flooded the global market in the mid-20th century, insurgencies and revolutionary groups found that a small number of fighters armed with automatic weapons could pin down superior conventional forces. The weapon that once allowed empires to dominate eventually made occupation prohibitively expensive and bloody. But perhaps the most lasting change was cultural. The machine gun stripped war of its last vestiges of romance. After the Somme, after Verdun, after Passchendaele, no one could honestly speak of war as a glorious adventure. The literature and art that emerged from the post-war era, the works of Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Sassoon, Erich Maria Remarque, were steeped in disillusionment. They depicted a world where humanity was ground up by machines. The image of the hero was replaced by the image of the victim. Hiram Maxim died in 1916, right in the middle of the carnage he helped facilitate. He died a wealthy man, knighted by the British Crown. It is said that in his later years he became deaf, a condition likely caused by the years spent testing his loud creations. There is a grim poetic justice in that. The man who orchestrated the cacophony of the 20th century ended his life in silence. Today, we live in a world defined by precision-guided munitions, drones, and cyber warfare. We speak of surgical strikes and kinetic action. Yet, the fundamental reality of ground combat remains unchanged since 1884. When soldiers meet in the field, the rhythm of the battle is still dictated by the rapid crack of automatic fire. The machine gun taught us a lesson that we are still learning, that technological advancement does not civilize war, it only makes it more efficient. The Maxim gun did not just change how we fight, it changed how we die. It took the intimacy out of killing and replaced it with industrial repetition. It proved that in the face of modern machinery, courage alone is not enough. It was the weapon that drew a line through history, separating the old world from the new, leaving millions of ghosts in the space between. It was the key to the Pandora's box of modern warfare, and once opened, it could never be closed. As we look back at the history of human conflict, there are many weapons that claimed to change the game. The longbow, the chariot, the atomic bomb. But the machine gun stands apart. It was the machine gun that dug the trenches. It was the machine gun that broke the cavalry. And it was the machine gun that taught the world the true, horrific cost of industrial war. It was, undeniably, the weapon that changed warfare.